That door closed behind me, and they thought my life was over. The sound was soft, almost polite. Not a slam, not anger, just a simple click. But that sound stayed with me longer than any shout ever could. I stood in the hallway for a moment, holding a folder in my hand. White walls, clean floors, the smell of fresh paint and old money. The kind of place where people lower their voices without knowing why. Behind that door were 3 people sitting at a table. They didn't know who I really was yet. To them, I was just another name on a paper, another landlord, another stranger with rules. They had no idea that 10 years ago, that same family had closed a very different door on me, and back then, they didn't even hesitate. I looked down at the folder again. Inside it were documents, signatures, numbers, proof, power. My name was printed there in black ink. I didn't smile. I didn't feel excited. What I felt was steady, because this moment wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. But before I tell you what happened in that room, before I tell you how their faces changed, you need to understand how we got here. So let me take you back to a different door, a cheaper door, a door with chipped paint and a broken lock, back to the night I was 18. Growing up, our house always felt full, not of love, but of noise. There were voices everywhere, orders, complaints, laughter that didn't include me. I learned early how to stay quiet, how to make myself small, how to disappear even when I was sitting right there. My parents were never cruel. They just didn't see me. They saw my older sibling, the golden one, the one with the good grades, the trophies, the attention. I was the extra chair at the table, the kid who didn't cause trouble, the one they never worried about, because they assumed I'd be fine. I wasn't. Every meal felt like a test I didn't know I was taking. Every conversation ended with someone else being praised. Every mistake I made stayed remembered longer than any success. Still, I stayed. I tried. I told myself things would change once I grew up. I was wrong. The night it happened, I remember the clock clearly. It was just past 10. Too late for a calm talk. Too early for regret. It started small. A comment, a misunderstanding, something that could have been fixed with one honest sentence. Instead, it turned into a decision. A final one. I remember standing there, my heart racing, trying to explain myself, trying to be heard for once. They didn't raise their voices. That's what hurt the most. They just looked at me like they were tired. Tired of me. My father crossed his arms. My mother avoided my eyes. And then the words came out. Slow, heavy. You're 18 now. You need to learn responsibility. You can't stay here anymore. No shouting, no tears, just instructions. I packed what I could fit into one bag. Clothes, a few books, nothing that proved I mattered. When I reached the door, I waited. I don't know why. Maybe I thought someone would stop me, say it was a mistake, say I could stay. No one did. Quiet. The door closed behind me, and they thought my life was over. Standing there in the present, outside that expensive office room, I could still hear that old door in my head. The same sound, the same final click. The only difference was this time, I wasn't the one being shut out. And they were about to find out what happens when the person you break comes back holding the keys. Before that night, before the door, the bag, and the silence, there was a lifetime of small moments that taught me exactly where I stood. I grew up in the same house as everyone else. I ate at the same table. I slept under the same roof.
but somehow I always felt like a guest who stayed too long. From as far back as I can remember, there was a clear line in our family. Not one anyone talked about, but everyone followed it. On one side was my sibling, the golden child. Everything they did was right. Every grade was celebrated. Every mistake was explained away. When they spoke, people listened. When they walked into a room, the mood changed. And then there was me. I wasn't bad. I wasn't wild. I wasn't a problem. I was just there. If my sibling brought home a report card, it went on the fridge. If I brought mine, it went into a drawer. If they were tired, they were told to rest. If I was tired, I was told to push harder. I learned early not to ask for things, not because I didn't want them, but because I already knew the answer. Maybe later. Not right now. We'll see. Later never came. At family gatherings, people would say my sibling's name with pride. They talked about their future like it was already written. When someone asked about me, my parents would smile politely and say, "Oh, they're fine." That was it. Fine. No dreams, no plans, no excitement. Just fine. That word followed me everywhere. I started doing things quietly, cleaning without being asked, helping without being thanked. I thought if I became useful enough, I'd become important. But usefulness isn't the same as love, and I didn't know that yet. Whenever something went wrong, eyes slowly turned to me, even if I had nothing to do with it. I became the easy answer, the safe blame. My sibling could argue, they could shout, they could storm off. I couldn't, because I knew one wrong move would cost me more than them. I learned how to swallow words, how to nod when I disagreed, how to smile when something hurt. I became good at disappearing. So good that sometimes I wondered if they'd even notice if I was gone. At night, I'd lie in bed and listen to the house breathe, the TV murmuring in the living room, laughter from the other bedroom. And I'd stare at the ceiling, feeling like I was taking up space I hadn't earned. Quiet realization. No one ever told me they didn't want me there. They didn't have to. Their silence said enough. I wasn't loved. I was tolerated. And when you grow up that way, you don't expect kindness. You just hope for fairness. But fairness was never part of the plan. Not back then, and not on the night they finally decided I no longer belonged at all.
Some nights change your life forever. Not because of what you did, but because of what others decided for you. That night didn't start with shouting. It started with something small. A simple disagreement. A misunderstanding that could have been fixed in minutes. I don't even remember the exact words anymore. I just remember the feeling. That heavy feeling in my chest. The one that tells you something bad is coming. My sibling was sitting on the couch, scrolling on their phone. Relaxed. Untouched by what was about to happen. I was standing near the kitchen, trying to explain myself, trying to be calm, trying not to sound defensive, but every sentence I spoke felt like it hit a wall. They didn't interrupt me. They didn't argue back. They just exchanged a look. That look. The one that says, "We're done talking." My father spoke first. Not angry, not loud, just tired. "You're 18 now." That was it. No question, no concern, just a statement. My mother stood beside him, arms folded. She nodded once. That nod hurt more than any shout ever could. They said I needed to learn responsibility, that staying in the house was making me comfortable, that life wouldn't be easy, and it was time I understood that. I looked at them, waiting for the rest, waiting for the part where they say this is a lesson, that I could come back. They never said it. I asked where I was supposed to go. My father shrugged. "You'll figure it out." Just like that. Years of being quiet,
of being good, of not causing trouble, and this was the reward. I went to my room in silence. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cry. I opened my closet and stared at my clothes like they belonged to someone else. I packed slowly. A few shirts, one jacket, some worn shoes. I left behind things that mattered because they didn't fit in the bag. I walked through the house one last time. The hallway light flickered like it always did. The floor creaked under my feet. No one followed me. No one asked if I was okay. My sibling didn't even look up from their phone. When I reached the front door, I stopped. I stood there longer than I should have. I don't know why. Maybe I was hoping for a voice behind me, a change of heart, a mistake being corrected. Nothing came. I opened the door. Cold air rushed in. I stepped outside, and then the door closed behind me. No goodbye, no warning, just silence. I stood there on the porch, holding my bag, staring at a house that no longer felt like mine. I didn't cry that night. I made a promise instead. A promise that one day, no one would ever have the power to throw me away again. The first night after they kicked me out, I didn't know where I was going to sleep. I walked for a long time, not because I had a plan, but because standing still made everything feel worse. My bag felt heavier with every step, not because of what was inside it, but because of what wasn't. A home, a backup, a place to go back to. I spent that first night on a friend's couch, not a close friend, just someone who felt sorry enough to say yes. The couch was short. The room smelled like old food. The TV stayed on all night because silence felt too loud. I lay there staring at the ceiling, afraid to move, afraid they'd change their mind and ask me to leave. That was my new fear now, being unwanted everywhere. One night turned into a few turned into weeks. I moved from couch to couch, friends of friends, people who barely knew my name. Every stay came with the same unspoken rule: don't get too comfortable. So I didn't. I took the first job that said yes. It didn't matter what it was. If it paid, I showed up. Early mornings, late nights, standing until my legs ached. I smiled when customers were rude. I nodded when managers talked down to me, because pride doesn't pay rent, and hunger doesn't care about dignity. There were days I skipped meals, not because I was dieting, but because I was counting coins. I learned which food kept me full the longest: cheap bread, instant noodles, water instead of soda. I told myself it was temporary, even when it didn't feel like it. At night, after work, I'd sit alone and think, not about my parents, not about my sibling, about myself. What if they were right? What if this is all I'm worth? Those thoughts came often, especially when I was tired, especially when no one checked on me. But something else came too, a quiet voice, not loud, not confident, just steady. If I'm already at the bottom, the only way left is up. I started paying attention to how money worked, to how people moved through life, to what mistakes I never wanted to repeat. I watched people who complained all day and people who worked quietly and left early. I noticed who grew and who stayed stuck, and I chose. I stopped waiting for help. No one was coming, so I became the help. I saved small amounts. I learned new skills at night after work. I rested when I could and pushed when I had to. Every small win mattered because no one was clapping for me. No one was watching, and somehow that made it easier. Being alone teaches you things. It teaches you how strong you actually are, how much you can survive without breaking, how quiet determination can be louder than anger. I didn't hate my family during those years. I just stopped expecting anything from them. Months passed, then years. I wasn't rich, I wasn't comfortable, but I was standing, on my own. Every step forward felt earned. Every breath felt like proof. They thought kicking me out would teach me a lesson. They were right. It taught me how to live without them. And one day, that lesson would change everything.
Survival kept me alive, but survival wasn't enough. I didn't want to just exist. I wanted to build something no one could take away from me. So I started with what I could control: my time, my focus, my effort. I went back to learning, not in big classrooms with fancy names, but in quiet places, late at night. I watched videos, read books from secondhand stores, asked questions when I didn't understand something. While others relaxed after work, I studied. While weekends passed, I practiced. I wasn't chasing success, I was chasing independence. Slowly, things started to change. I got better jobs. Nothing impressive at first, just slightly better than before. A few more hours, a little more pay. But to me, it felt like proof. Proof that effort could turn into progress. I saved money the way some people save secrets. Quietly, carefully. No celebrating, no telling anyone. I learned how to budget, how to plan ahead, how to think in years, not days. Every decision had one question behind it. Will this help future me? I started thinking differently about money, not as something to spend, but as something to grow. I took small risks, very small. Some worked, some didn't. But every mistake taught me more than comfort ever could. Years passed like this. Work, learn, save, repeat. I moved into my own place. Not big, not fancy, but it was mine. I paid rent on time. I slept without fear. I woke up knowing no one could throw me out. That feeling alone was worth everything. I didn't tell my family any of this, not because I was angry, because I was done explaining myself. Silence became my shield. No calls, no messages, no updates. If they ever thought of me, they wouldn't know where to find me. As my confidence grew, so did my vision. I started looking beyond paychecks, assets, opportunities, things that could work for me while I slept. I asked questions most people were afraid to ask. I listened more than I spoke. People started taking me seriously, not because I talked big, but because I showed up prepared. The day my first real deal worked out, I sat alone in my room. No cheering, no one to call. I just stared at the numbers on the screen and smiled. Not because I felt rich, but because I felt capable. One evening, while going through paperwork, I noticed something. An address. It felt familiar. I read it again, and then it hit me. The street name, the block, the layout. My heart slowed. That's when I saw their address and recognized the building. I stared at that address for a long time. Not because I missed them, not because I felt angry, but because life had just placed a familiar piece back on the board. I didn't act right away. I never do. I've learned that the most powerful moves are the quiet ones. I started asking questions, not directly, not carelessly, just enough to understand the picture. That's when I found out the truth. They were struggling. Bills piling up, repairs delayed, stress hiding behind forced smiles. The same people who told me to figure it out were barely holding things together themselves. I didn't feel joy, and I didn't feel pity either. What I felt was clarity, because for the first time, the balance had shifted. I looked deeper into the building they lived in, the ownership, the numbers, the future. I noticed something important. The place wasn't owned by them. It never had been. They were renting, and the owner was ready to sell. I didn't rush. I didn't celebrate. I ran the numbers again and again, checked every detail, asked professionals instead of friends.
I moved carefully, because this wasn't about revenge. This was about control. I didn't buy it under my name. I used a company, a clean, simple setup. An agent handled everything. No personal meetings, no face-to-face talks, just signatures, just documents, just quiet ownership. The day the deal closed, nothing changed on the outside. No fireworks, no big moment. They went home like always, unlocked their door like always, completely unaware that the ground beneath them had shifted. I sat alone that night, holding the paperwork. My name wasn't on the front page, but it was there, hidden, protected, patient. I didn't plan what I'd say if I ever saw them. I didn't imagine their faces. I just waited, because time was on my side now, and they had no idea. They never checked the owner's name.
The first time I saw them again, it wasn't at a family table. It wasn't during a holiday. It wasn't emotional. It was business. I walked into the building like I belonged there, because now I did. The hallway smelled the same, old paint, faint dust, but I didn't feel small anymore. I felt steady. They were already inside the office when I entered, sitting close together, tired, worried, older than I remembered. For a moment, none of them looked up. They were busy talking to the agent, about rent, about repairs, about time. They didn't recognize me, not at first. I had changed, not just my clothes, but the way I carried myself. I stood straight. I spoke slowly. I didn't rush my words. Confidence does that. The agent cleared his throat and introduced me. "This is the representative for the owner." I nodded politely. "Nice to meet you." My voice didn't shake. They looked at me then, really looked. Their eyes passed over my face, searching for something familiar. They didn't find it, and that told me everything I needed to know. I took a seat across from them, opened the folder. Papers neat, terms clear. I spoke about the building, the maintenance, the future. No emotion, no history, just facts. They asked questions. I answered. They complained. I listened. Every word they spoke felt heavier now, because the power had shifted, and they didn't even feel it yet. Sitting there, I realized something. They weren't monsters. They were just people who never thought their choices would come back around. One of them laughed nervously, tried to ease the tension. They always did that when they were uncomfortable, I remembered. They didn't. I stayed polite, professional, respectful. I didn't remind them of the past. I didn't ask if they remembered the night they kicked me out. Not yet. Because this moment wasn't about revenge. This was the setup, the calm before the truth. And as I closed the folder and stood up, I saw it. A flicker of doubt, a feeling that something wasn't right. But it passed. They smiled politely, thanked me. They still had no idea who I was, and I was in no hurry to tell them. The second meeting was different. The room felt smaller. The air felt heavier. They were tense this time, careful with their words. They knew something had changed. They just didn't know what. I arrived early and stood by the window, looking down at the street. The same street I once walked on with a bag in my hand, not knowing where I'd sleep that night. Funny how life circles back. When they walked in, I turned slowly. We exchanged polite greetings again. Still no recognition. Not yet. While reviewing the paperwork, my mother, one of the tenants,
noticed my last name on a document. Her eyes stopped moving. Silence. She looked at the paper, then at me, then back at the paper. She said my name out loud, not loud, almost like a question. The room went still. My father leaned forward, squinted, studied my face like it was a puzzle he had ignored for years. Then his expression changed. Not anger, not fear, shock. My sibling froze, phone forgotten, smile gone. They finally saw me. No one spoke. The silence wasn't empty, it was heavy, filled with memories no one wanted to touch. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse them. I just said, "Yes, it's me." Nothing more, nothing less. My mother's face drained of color. My father leaned back in his chair like the air had been knocked out of him. My sibling looked down. For the first time in my life, they had nothing to say. I gave them time. I didn't rush the moment, because some truths need silence to sink in. Finally, my father spoke, not to argue, not to defend, but to ask, "When did this happen?" I answered honestly, "Over time." That was all. I opened the folder again, went back to business. I explained the new terms. Nothing unfair, nothing illegal, just firm. Rent adjusted to market value, rules enforced properly, no favors. They nodded. They understood. They had taught me this lesson once. Now I was returning it. I didn't throw them out. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't take pleasure in their discomfort, but I didn't save them either. Because this wasn't revenge built on anger. It was built on balance, and balance doesn't shout.
After that meeting, nothing dramatic happened. No shouting, no slammed doors, no sudden endings. And that was the point. People often think revenge has to be loud, that it has to hurt, that someone has to lose everything. But I had already lost everything once. I didn't need to repeat that story. I didn't evict them. I could have. The papers allowed it. The law was on my side. But power doesn't always mean using every option. Sometimes it means choosing restraint. Instead, I gave them exactly what they once gave me: responsibility. No extra help, no special treatment, no emotional safety net. Just clear rules and fair terms. The kind they told me would build character. I watched them adjust, cut back on spending, fix their own problems, learn how life feels without a safety net. I didn't interfere, I didn't rescue them, and I didn't punish them either. What surprised me most was how little anger I felt. I thought seeing them struggle would make me feel powerful. It didn't. What it gave me was closure. I finally understood something. They never hated me. They just didn't think about me. And that hurt, but it also freed me. I stopped waiting for apologies that would never come. I stopped replaying the past in my head. I stopped needing them to understand, because I finally did. I kept my distance. No family dinners, no late-night calls, just polite distance, boundaries where pain used to be. Walking away from that chapter felt lighter than winning ever could. I wasn't proving anything anymore. I was protecting myself. Revenge isn't about hurting others. It's about reclaiming yourself. They closed a door on me once. I didn't break it down. I built my own house instead. And that made all the difference.